Nestled deep within a valley, far from the gaze of the morning sun, lay the village of ShitVille. It wasn't the most charming of names, true, but what's a village to do when built next to a swamp with an, shall we say, ecosystem? The real peculiarity, however, wasn't the village's name nor its fragrant aroma. It was King Bartholomew, the ruler of this peculiar land. Now, kings are often known for their eccentricities. Some collect stamps, others fancy exotic birds. Bartholomew? He had a penchant for the nocturnal and an obsession that would make even the most hardened peasant blanch. Each night, as the moon cast an eerie glow upon ShitVille, the king would shed his royal robes and don a simple hooded cloak. He'd sneak out of the castle, his face hidden in the shadows, his destination, the very swamp that gave his kingdom its name. What was he looking for in that murky expanse? The villagers whispered amongst themselves. Some spoke of a rare herb said to grant eternal life. Others, with a mischievous glint in their eyes, swore he was courting a swamp witch with a penchant for frog legs. The truth, however, was far more bizarre. King Bartholomew, you see, was on a quest for the most magnificent turd in the land. Every night the king would brave the stench and the biting insects, his boots sinking into the bog with a sickening squish. He'd meticulously inspect every piece of excrement, muttering to himself about texture, size and artistic merit. The villagers, of course, were utterly clueless about their king's nightly escapades. They assumed he spent his nights poring over scrolls, strategizing, or perhaps engaging in more kingly pursuits. Little did they know, their ruler was knee-deep in the swamp, a royal flush upon his face, not from shame, but from pure, unadulterated excitement. The king's obsession had begun innocently enough. One day, while taking a rather urgent constitutional in the royal privy, he had produced a specimen of such size and splendour that it had stopped him, well, mid-constitutional. Never before had he witnessed such a thing of beauty. It was, in his eyes, a masterpiece, a testament to the power of the human digestive system. From that day forward, King Bartholomew was a changed man. He scoured ancient texts, consulted with scholars, even sought the advice of shepherds rumoured to possess an uncanny understanding of animal droppings. He had to find more. He had his royal artisans craft him a series of velvet-lined boxes, each one more opulent than the last. These were not meant for jewels or crowns, oh no. These were reserved for his growing collection of extraordinary excrement. The king's obsession became an open secret within the castle walls. Servants whispered behind cupped hands. The royal guards exchanged knowing glances. But nobody dared question the king's peculiar hobby. After all, who would bell the cat, especially when the cat had a penchant for collecting poop? Night after night, the king would return to the swamp, his pockets bulging with his latest finds. He developed a keen eye, able to differentiate between the droppings of various creatures with a single glance. He could tell you the diet of a badger based on its leavings, the age of a wild boar from its dung. He became, in his own mind at least, the foremost expert on excrement in the entire kingdom. And yet, despite his vast and ever-growing collection, the king yearned for more. He dreamed of finding the ultimate turd, the holy grail of bowel movements, if you will. Little did he know his quest was about to reach a messy and rather unfortunate climax. One particularly humid night, as the swamp pulsed with the croaks of frogs and the buzz of mosquitoes, King Bartholomew stumbled upon something truly remarkable. It was, even by his standards, a colossal turd. It lay there on the muddy bank, glistening in the moonlight, a behemoth of fecal matter. The king gasped, his heart pounding with excitement. He had never seen anything like it. He scrambled towards it, his hands trembling with anticipation. Unbeknownst to the king, however, he was not alone in the swamp that night. A young countryman, Jebediah, was making his way home after a night of carousing at the village tavern. Jebediah had consumed a prodigious amount of ale that evening, and nature was calling. He stumbled through the undergrowth, desperately seeking relief. He came to a clearing, his eyes blurry, his bladder near bursting. Well now, Jebediah mumbled to himself, swaying slightly. That's a right proper log. He fumbled with his trousers, his back turned to the approaching king. Bartholomew, oblivious to the impending disaster, reached out a hand to claim his prize. "Eureka!" he exclaimed, his voice echoing through the stillness of the swamp. At that precise moment, Jebediah, in a move that can only be described as unfortunate timing, chose to relieve himself. Section 4. The Price of Obsession, a Royal Downfall. The jet of liquid waste caught King Bartholomew squarely in the face. The king, momentarily stunned, let out a startled yelp. The force of the stream knocked him off balance, and he tumbled backward into the swamp with a resounding splash. Jebediah, finally relieved, turned around to see a figure flailing in the mud, covered head to toe in, well, him. "Good heavens," Jebediah exclaimed, finally realizing the situation. "You all right there, fella?" The king, sputtering and wiping his eyes, struggled to his feet. He looked down at his soiled clothes, the stench of the swamp, now mingled with something far more personal. His face, normally flushed with excitement during his nocturnal excursions, was now a mask of horror and disgust. He looked up at Jebediah, his eyes blazing with fury. "Do you have any idea," the king roared, his voice dripping with rage, "what you have done?" Jebediah, still oblivious to the identity of the mud-caked figure before him, shrugged. "Look, I apologize," he said. "Nature calls and all. Didn't think anyone else would be out here admiring the local wildlife, if you know what I mean." The king, beside himself with anger, pointed a trembling finger at Jebediah. "Guards! Seize this man!" he shrieked. But there were no guards. Only the croaking of frogs and the buzzing of mosquitoes answered his call. Section 5. Legacy of the Mad King, a cautionary tale. The next morning, the villagers awoke to a strange sight. Their king, covered in mud and smelling quite ripe, was standing in the village square, ranting about a monstrous turd and a vile fiend who had ruined his night. Needless to say, the villagers were bewildered. The king's tale of his nocturnal adventures and his unfortunate encounter with Jebediah, who by the way had fled the scene and was never seen in ShitVille again, was met with a mixture of amusement and concern. King Bartholomew, his reputation forever tarnished, retreated into his castle and was rarely seen again. Some say he never recovered from the trauma of that fateful night. Others whispered that he continued his collection in secret, forever haunted by the memory of the one that got away. And so the legend of the Mad King of ShitVille was passed down through generations, a cautionary tale about the perils of obsession and the importance of, well, choosing your moments wisely. As for ShitVille itself, it remained true to its name. The swamp continued to thrive, providing an endless supply of inspiration for the king's rumoured successor, a young prince who, it is said, has developed a peculiar fascination with collecting. Well, let's just say, history has a funny way of repeating itself.